welcome to Found in Translation, a weekly-ish exploration of one fellow's translation of the Christian scriptures, one chapter or less at a time. I'm Brandon Rhodes, and across the internet from me is the translator himself, Brandon Johnson. Hey, Brandon.
Hey, Brandon.
Good to see you. I'm looking forward to this episode.
Yeah, good to see you. It's got some lists to go over.
Yes, it's got the naughty list. And the good list.
Mm-hmm.
And also some weird stuff about our bodies.
Right. The usual.
The usual. So yeah, that's actually pretty much the summary. This is the part of the episode where we usually say, give the rundown of what we're going to talk about. But I think we just did.
Yeah, I think so.
Everywhere that you usually see the word flesh in translations of Galatians, you've got some variants of things like desires of the flesh, impulsive bodily cravings, impulsive actions motivated by the body. That sort of language is what you've used. So we're going to talk about that as you listeners give it another read through. That's what we're going to talk about, as well as that list of good things and bad things. So yeah, as always, it's a good time to read through that. You can, if you haven't had a chance to read it, there's a link to it in the episode description, and we'll have it up on the screen momentarily. And always do check out the footnotes. The coffee is taken over my mind this morning. I feel like one of those ants in the Amazon with spores hitting them in the head.
Oh, God.
Feel strangely compelled to climb to the highest branch. Anyway, check out the footnotes. Give it a hit pause and give it a read. We'll be here. Everybody, welcome back. Let's start with this passage flows way more easily out loud than so much of the rest of Galatians. So, Brandon, would you just mind reading through the whole stretch there, 13 through the end of the chapter?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, sir.
You were called to be in freedom, family. Not freedom only for bodily impulses, but instead to serve each other through love. Because the whole Torah can be fully lived out with one saying. Here it is. Love your neighbor as yourself. However, if you are biting and feeding on each other, watch out that you are not completely devoured. I'm telling you, walk with the life breath, and do not satisfy impulsive bodily cravings, because the body craves things that are against the life breath. These things are in opposition to each other. So you must not just do whatever you want. If you are led by the life breath, you are not under Torah. Impulsive actions motivated by the body are easy to recognize. Whatever is sexual exploitation, uncleanness, lack of restraint, idolatry, substance abuse, hostilities, combativeness, fanaticism, aggression, combative competition, divisions, sectarianism, envies, murder, alcohol abuse, unrestrained indulgence at celebrations, and other things like these. I predict for you, just like I already predicted, that those who practice these things will not inherit God's reign. On the other hand, the fruit of the life breath is love, joy, peace, patience, beneficence, or kindness, beneficial living, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-restraint. Torah is not against these things. Those who belong to Christ crucified the bodily impulses along with its suffering and cravings. If we are alive through the life breath, we should also walk in line with the life breath. We should not become people who project an empty reputation, posturing toward each other, being envious of each other. Word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. Well, this is great. It really is a shift, I think, rhetorically. The last week's episode the start of chapter 5 is kind of the start of Paul's victory lap, or kind of the
Mm-hmm.
crescendo of like what this all more constructively looks like. And now he's focusing on like, here are kind of the outcomes. Here's the outcome
Mm-hmm.
of when we are belonging, and membership is in through the faithfulness of Christ, not the works of Torah. And here's how it still it gets you a lot of the same things. It's not
Mm-hmm.
you're not losing what matters
Yeah.
most, which is like attunement to the life breath.
Right. Yeah. If it weren't so circuitous, this like the structure of Galatians overall is like good writing. Like he
Yeah.
starts with a story that illustrates like what the heck he's even talking about,
Mm-hmm.
and then spends like the next few chapters saying what isn't what he's envisioning, like what to stop, what to let go of.
Mm-hmm.
And now finally in chapter 5, he's like, and here's the alternative that I'm trying to point you to.
Yeah. Yeah. It's two different ways of connecting the dots in the sacred stories of his people and the sacred scriptures.
Mm-hmm.
You're connecting the dots to say cultural conformity through things like male circumcision, um, and ethnic segregation are what it means, and I'm saying
Mm-hmm.
it's this other thing.
Right.
And now
Which,
go ahead.
which happens to be love your neighbor as yourself, basically.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There it is in verse 14. Um, this first phrase, though, that he starts to hold up in some level of tension is, he's shifted away from things like kind of emphasizing the way that a toxic form of Torah allegiance is a bad way of connecting the dots and telling the story. And he's shifting more towards
Mm-hmm.
this thing of that is otherwise translated as something like the impulses of the flesh or that kind of thing. And it
Right.
and
Desires of the flesh.
yeah, yeah. Why is that language problematic?
Yeah, I think it's because of the various ways that people understand the word flesh. So, like,
Mm-hmm.
literally, the word sarx is talking about like the stuff bodies are made of, which is what the English word flesh
Meat.
means. Right. Yeah. It's your human meat.
Yeah.
Um, so as far as like just a very literal translation, flesh is correct, but all sorts of theological just like garbage has been dumped into that as a religious technical term. Um, and I don't think it's that, at least most of what has been connected in that way is not what is really ever being talked about.
Yeah. So that word is factually correct, but not actually faithful.
Right. Yeah, because it's not that like our bodies are bad, or even like the kinds of things that our bodies are interested in are
Yes.
bad. That's
No.
not what that means. Um, but when they become out of balance or it's impulsive and not holding the tension of like, maybe I want food right now, but maybe I have a hot meal to go home to and the person next to me hasn't had a meal in 3 days. And so the thing that would be loving my neighbor as myself would be to give whatever food I have to that person. Eating my food is not a bad thing, but it is like the loving thing is more important in that moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but if I'm just thoughtless and impulsive about, well, I'm hungry, so I'm going to eat. Like,
Mm-hmm.
again, not bad, but what's your north star? What is guiding your decisions on a daily basis overall? And is it this larger value system that centers following the example Christ gave of loving your neighbor as yourself, like in a sometimes very uncomfortable way? Um, or is it like just whatever I feel like I need in the moment, I have to do, regardless of what else is going on?
Mm-hmm.
And that can be related to sex. The church traditions that I've had the most exposure to like automatically assume we're talking about the flesh, we're talking about sex. And that's
That's right.
usually not the case, actually.
Yeah, that list
If you
has
look
a
at the
whole bunch of other
context,
things.
Right. And here and other places, like where the word flesh is used, it's usually not in a context that's about sex. Occasionally, sometimes, like here, it's in the list, but yeah, it's not the focus.
Yeah, it's kind of telling on themselves. It's been telling on ourselves to
Yeah.
make that assumption that flesh language is about like wanting to do it
Uh-huh.
all the time and that's bad or something.
Right.
It's like, well, we've certainly been conditioned by a toxic, like abusive, exploitive domination vision of sexuality
Mm-hmm.
in within patriarchy that kind of tells the story that men are out of control and can't control their sex drives, which was actually it was the inverse 100 years ago in America. It was women who were the like voracious succubi, and we were
That
victims
was the
of their.
story. Yeah,
Yeah,
the story that was being told
that was
anyway.
the story that was being told, and it's just whoever it is that you think is like completely like sex fixated and out of control. Yeah, these days interpreting it as that is like,
Yeah, this is not what
mm,
it's about. In fact, in Galatians and Ephesians too,
yeah,
there's a few things that come up a lot, and one of them is just like greed in general. So anytime that you're using other people or disregarding the needs of other people for your own gain, that's desires of the flesh or impulsive actions of bodily cravings.
that's really concise. Can you say that again?
And let's say I don't remember what I said now. Okay, anytime you are using other people or disregarding other people's needs for your own gain.
Mm-hmm. That's desires of the flesh or impulsive
Right,
bodily cravings.
right. Or acting on those impulsive bodily cravings
Yeah,
anyway. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
because our impulses, like our bodies, are always trying to tell us what they need and to how,
Mm-hmm.
or
Yeah. And
and they'll
listening
throw
to that
any.
is important, but doesn't mean you automatically have to do the first idea that comes to mind for how to meet that need.
Yeah, like God made earthly creatures such as us with all kinds of really great needs. We need for social connection and
Mm-hmm.
social safety is built into our bodies. The
Yep.
need for food and water, um,
Mm-hmm.
typically an instinct for reproduction through sexual connection, is yeah,
And emotional bonding
and
and
emotional
even
bonding. Yeah.
physical touch is a true need. Like there's been studies that have looked into like babies will die even if they're warm and clothed and fed and clean, and if they're not being held, they will
Yes.
die.
Yeah. Yeah. We want. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's about we have this instinct for physical closeness as well. These are all great, wonderful, mysterious things.
Mm-hmm.
Delight, pleasure, the pleasure of alcohol is right down there. Like it's fine, it's
Mm-hmm.
fun, it's cool. Um, and this isn't a call to moderation, but to harnessing it for love.
Right.
Or it's
Yep.
not. It's also not a call to like self um, condemning all of these things. Like, how dare you be hungry? It's
Yeah,
like,
not
well,
all of
don't be a
them.
glutton.
Yeah. Right. And if you look in the list too, the other major theme that I keep seeing here and in other places is that the like desires of the flesh or bodily cravings that come up have to do with aggression and
Oh
being
yeah.
like confrontationally reactive,
Mm-hmm.
um and like yeah, just going like, well, I'm pissed, so I'm going to act on it and make you suffer. Like that's often what it's talking about when it's talking about like the works of the flesh or the
Oh,
desires of the
fascinating.
flesh. Yeah,
Huh.
desire to have power over each other, or yeah,
Meet
to
your
feel
yeah.
secure by being a dick,
Yeah, that's
by
basically it.
asserting power and yeah, strength.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, this is not about things that can lead us to a sense of shame, or like, particularly for those of us
Mm-hmm.
who grew up in spent any amount of time around purity culture,
Mm-hmm.
like the flesh, like every time you are feeling sexually energetic, don't do that. Don't think about that. That's something sinful and bad and wrong in you. It's like, that's
Mm-hmm.
that's really ugly and
Yeah.
harmful. So many millions of people have trauma and wounds in them because of this, and they aren't at home. We've had to struggle to be at home with our own sexuality
Mm-hmm.
because of that way of telling it, when really it's just a list of like, don't be a dick. And
Yeah. Yeah. I can say as a couples counselor,
mm,
I remember growing up being told that like, yeah, having sex before you're married or just being impure, even if it's
mhm,
not full intercourse before you're married, will ruin your future marriage. Like it'll
right.
destroy your sexual relationship with your future spouse. And as a couples counselor, I can say I have worked with people where it's just the opposite. Like their whole sexual relationship with their spouse is screwed up to the point of destroying their whole relationship and needing a lot of help and healing because of purity culture
Yes.
and the sense of like, what, I was told this was bad. Now I'm married. All is supposed sudden it's supposed to be good. In fact, and then if like woman, it's usually the sense of now I owe it and have to, like I have no autonomy over my body before I'm married or after. It's always like just the men in my life get to tell me not to have sex, and now the man in my life gets to tell me I have to have sex.
Yes. So sex
Yeah.
is entirely built around control, domination, and shame. And the shame
Mm-hmm.
piece is, I was talking to a friend a few years ago who kind of winsomely disclosed, like, yeah, we were in this evangelical world, and we were having sex, and boy, we really regret that. Like, it really had a legacy on us, like going into our marriage. We have it worked out now, but um we wish we hadn't. They were right. It really did hurt us. And I was like, wait a minute, was that because you had to hide it? Like, your sexuality was born in a context of concealment and shame and social pressure, and
Mm-hmm.
living in this tension between other people saying one thing and the the joy of communion you were trying to
Yeah.
find and feel.
Right. The actions that are meant to create connection and joy and beauty became like linked with shame and darkness and disconnection.
Yeah.
Not because of the actions themselves, but because of the context of being supposedly a shameful thing to do.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. What a vicious self-fulfilling prophecy it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so one path towards having a healthier culture in churches around sex, around shame and our bodies, is includes the work of prying this stuff out of existing translations and making sure that we aren't leaving a foothold for the accuser,
Right.
because that's what
Yep.
exactly what it did and
Exactly. Yep.
came to be. Like, it's not the fault of the translator who first went with flesh. I'm
No,
not interested in
no.
casting the stones, but I
It's
am
all
interested
the
in
many
pointing where,
centuries of, yeah,
yeah,
connecting flesh with this
there's a
theology that was
there's
bad.
a clear place that we can tidy this up. And um, if people are going to argue for toxic ways of relating to our bodies, uh, they don't get to use the Bible for that. Like, I'm done. I'm done with that. The
Mm-hmm.
Bible does not have its dominant voice is not one of anything like that.
No, it's not
Um,
meant to be a weapon.
yeah, yeah. So there's this big list.
Mm-hmm.
He's Paul's contrasting those who are led by the life breath um, with kind of the impulsive actions motivated by the body, as it is in verse
Right.
19. Should we just walk through this list and
Sure, let's do it.
great. Are you able to have a other conventional translation up on the screen for your, at least for yourself as well? Be
Sure. Let me
we
pull
don't have to
something
get
up
it on
here.
the.
Let's see. Who do we want to have up here? Want
The
to just
extra
pick on the
sexist version.
ESV? Yeah, let's pick on the ESV.
Kick that dead
All
horse.
right. All right.
It was foreordained. They would. That's what they would say.
Right. Something like that anyway.
Yeah.
Okay. Got chapter 5 up here.
All right. I'll read. I'll read your word, and then you can. We'll just tick through it, and then go through one by one. How's that sound?
Sure.
Okay. Sexual exploitation.
Sexual immorality.
Whoa, man.
uh-huh.
Uncleanness.
Impurity.
Lack of restraint.
Sensuality.
Whoa. Whoa. How many episodes is this going to take? Idolatry.
Yeah. Idolatry.
Okay, that's good. Substance abuse.
Sorcery.
Oh, that is so dope. I kind of want that word to stay. Hostilities.
Enmity basically means the same thing.
So yeah. Combativeness.
Strife, again, basically the same thing.
Same thing. Yeah. Fanaticism.
Yeah. Jealousy.
Whoa, that's a shift. Okay. Aggression. Mm-hmm.
Fits of anger. So similar.
Combative competition.
Rivalries, which basically means the same thing, but
yeah. Divisions.
Dissensions.
Uh-huh. Okay. I see where you went with that. I like that. Sectarianism.
Divisions.
Oh shit. Okay.
They're very similar words.
Yeah. Envies.
Envy, and also I was going to point out that like spite might be a good translation for that word too.
Oh, there you go. Okay. Yeah. Murder.
That's the one that's next, really?
That's what you have in yours. Envies, sectarianism, envies, murder, alcohol abuse.
Interesting. I think they might have one less in their list than me. So nothing, apparently.
Okay, cool.
The ESV next. Yeah.
The ESV is like fine with murder. They're just like, we're gonna
apparently. Now I'm gonna have to look at the Greek after looking at the ESV here. Just to like, is something? What's going on there?
Yeah, alcohol abuse,
drunkenness,
unrestrained indulgence at celebrations, revelry,
orgies.
Oh shit! Okay. So you took out orgies and sorcery.
Yeah,
that's spectacular. And other things like these. Okay. Okay, let's start with that big one at the start. It's not sexual immorality. It's sexual
I'm not totally crazy. NET does have murder where I have murder. So I don't know what's going on with the ESV. They left something out there, but
yeah, they telling on themselves again.
Yeah.
Okay, sexual exploitation. Is that porneia?
It is, yeah, which we've talked about quite a bit. I don't know if we've done that all in Galatians, but
it's an important enough one to repeat every time we can.
I think so. So one of the traditional translations of this word is fornication, right? Which is where people get the idea that any sex to someone you're not married to in a legally binding contract is sin, right? That's not what porneia means, and that idea doesn't occur anywhere in the Bible.
Yeah, you can argue for its merit, but you can't argue for it.
You could argue for it, right? Yeah, there's no like the translations that say fornication are mistranslating that word too narrowly, and making it say something it doesn't say. Yeah. With that caveat, sexual exploitation might also be a little too narrow, but in a way that I think is worth trying out.
Mm-hmm.
'Cause sexual immorality is both good and bad in its broadness, I think. Um, but there's reasons, as we've talked about before, why I went with exploitation. Porneia is related to the verb for to sell.
Yeah.
Um, and porne is female sex worker, pornos is male sex worker or pimp, essentially.
Huh.
Um, so there's a lot of connections here with sex for sale,
Mm-hmm.
basically.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it does get used in contexts where it's not explicitly talking about sex for sale, but it's making it like basically where sex is transactional,
Ah, yes.
where the person you're having sex with is being viewed as an object for you to purchase or use, or they owe you in sex in some way.
Mm-hmm.
You get to take it because it's your right,
Mm-hmm.
or benefit from it, even if you're not the person having sex, if you are selling them for the use.
Well, that aligns with the general flow of how sex and money are talked about by the early Jesus movement.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, yeah, sexual immorality is so vague and culture. That's the thing is it's so culturally squishy. You
Right.
drop the phrase sexual immorality um, in one part of the world at one time in history, and the same part of the world a different time in history or a different part of the world,
Mm-hmm.
and you get different senses of what is okay and what
Yeah.
isn't. So,
Yeah. It becomes whatever makes me uncomfortable is not okay.
yeah,
Is
yep,
kind of what happens
that's
there.
exactly it. Whatever I'm grossed out by, or I think is threatening the gender relations that I believe I want to keep a hold of.
Yeah.
Yeah, so critiquing the intersection of money and sexuality is much more. It's more specific, and it's keeping with the linguistic roots of it.
Right. Yep.
And it's important. I would say I'd like to just note that that's not a condemnation of actual sex workers. Like it, like
No.
Jesus hung out with them a lot and got like
Right.
um,
So
scorned
even
for it.
related to sex work itself, whatever our like preconceived judgments are about it
Mm-hmm.
need to be completely renovated. So
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, just and be reflective on like what sex work was in the context that this was written in. For example, it was
right.
substantially bound up with um, non-Jewish temple worship and religious, like cultic prostitution was part of it in some cities more than others.
Yeah. Which is interesting because I read something recently by Wilde Gaffney
Oh,
that actually argues with that and says that that wasn't a thing.
wow, really?
Uh-huh.
Oh, that's fascinating.
But
Huh.
that's for another time.
It is, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was
But
just such a
just reading that was the first time I've ever heard that idea that it wasn't a thing. So
mhm. to
yeah.
to riff in, I guess, a slightly different direction. The Greek notions of sex included things like the penetrator having power
Hmm.
over the penetrated, and
Yeah. Regardless of gender.
yeah, regardless of gender. And so a lot of the like even like
Yeah.
same sex relationships were fundamentally designed as like a power and domination thing,
Hmm.
and patriarchy within a male female sexual bond it was as well. So
Right.
that's pretty exploitive. Like to
Hmm.
penetrate is to dominate or exploit or take power or essence. I will not let anybody take my
Right.
my
Right.
essence. Mil Mandrake. Um, that's a movie reference. Um, yeah, that all loops in. It's not. It doesn't have to just be talking about sex work. It's talking about like
Right.
domination in the bedroom.
Right.
Next
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
Uncleanness.
Uncleanness. Largely, the shift there was making sure it didn't say impurity because that just was too close to somehow making it all about sex again, which isn't literally what impurity means, but it has become that
Yeah.
in how the
I mean,
church uses it.
purity culture, right, is a thing
Right,
now. Yeah.
right. But as we talked about before, the way it looks to me is Jesus and Paul, when they use cleanness and uncleanness, they're basically describing treating others well or not,
Mm-hmm.
as the like faithful way to actually think about cleanness, regardless
Mm-hmm.
of what the specific like Levitical rules for this and that were,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
which is
Yeah,
kind of
there's
what this whole thing is talking about.
yeah, and a lot of the reasons why purity is such a um, fractured paradigm, purity
Mm-hmm.
language is we've kind of been bouncing around talking about flesh language and sexual morality. So,
Right.
um, and what's the book that we all read that was so good about that?
Oh, unclean.
Unclean. Yeah, by I think Richard Beck.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody should read that. I'll drop a
Yeah.
affiliate link in the show notes. Incredible book about purity language and purity psychology.
Yeah. It's fascinating.
Yeah. Let's see. Next one we've got is what's the next one? Why don't you walk us through which
Yeah.
ones?
Yeah. Lack of restraint is next, which is just really different than what do they have in the ESV again? It was sensuality, which somehow makes it related to sex again. Um,
There's
but the
kind of
word
a
there is just,
fixation.
yeah, the word there is the same word that's for like self-discipline or
Yeah.
self-restraint, but negated. So self-undiscipline, or is
Oh.
basically what it's saying.
Uh-huh. Okay,
And
what about sorcery?
yeah,
Or you
that
got a
one,
substance abuse, yeah.
right, yeah, which is a little bit of a swing on my part to make it be substance abuse, but I think it's at least arguable.
Mm-hmm.
And let me find my footnote here that has the notes that it's from like the Greek word, yeah, pharmakeia, which
Uh-huh.
is where we get pharmacy in English. And it was used of chemicals. Yeah, so like sorcery in the sense of like alchemy and like chemistry, like that people didn't really understand, and like anything you don't understand it must be magic, right?
Right.
Um, but it was used for talking about, that word was used about medicines,
Mm.
and even so, like for instance, the stuff that they gave Jesus on the cross that like soaked a sponge,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
we're trying to offer him stuff. One of them he did take a drink of, and one of them he didn't. But the one that he didn't had stuff in it that was in small doses was a painkiller. In large doses, people used as a drug to like
Oh wow.
have recreational use.
Huh.
And in real large doses was poison, like overdosing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so it's the same thing, like those words are all connected with this pharmakeia word, and so like yeah, medicines, just like we have opioids now,
Mm-hmm.
get abused for recreational use because it
Mm-hmm.
makes you feel good, and then it becomes this impulsive thing that you can't stop. I think that's what it's talking about here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What's the next one on the list? There's quite a few here that are a bit pretty similar.
Yeah, there's idolatry, which is fairly straightforward. Hostilities and combativeness, fanaticism, aggression, combative competition, division, sectarian, like kind of all the rest of them through murder have to do with not getting along to each other and being aggressive and angry and
Yeah.
uh, belittling each other, and yeah, being violent and all that kind
Yeah.
of stuff. Um,
Alcohol abuse.
Alcohol abuse is just kind of an updated way to say drunkenness. Um, yeah, unrestrained indulgence at celebrations. I've been trying to figure out if that's the best way to say that or not, because I see where they got orgies. It's talking about these like celebratory like processions where people like had a ton of alcohol and there was sex going on, and there's like the festival of like Bacchus is one example. It's those kind of events where people would just like go really overboard in indulgence in all sorts of ways. And I'm just like at parties and stuff now, like frat parties and stuff, I'm sure people are getting raped, people are getting injured. They're like, it's not a good idea. It's just too much. It's too much. It's not that it's like, it's not that sex or alcohol or celebrating are bad things. Like, we are supposed to celebrate. But
yeah, I mean, Jesus' first miracle was like giving good wine to people who are already pretty buzzed.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So that's what it's talking about here. So it feels like like a really common word that I could use would be like partying, but it doesn't. Yeah, it just doesn't feel like that's the right word.
No,
to use
we're not
in
Jehovah's
Bible
Witnesses.
translation. Yeah. So this is this long phrase of unrestrained indulgence celebrations is what I came at, but it's pretty wordy. So I couldn't figure out a different word. Carousing is what one of the ones using. Like, what does that even mean? So this. But
and is it okay? Let's drop down. We've just got a couple minutes left here. Anything you want to center on in that list of the good things?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, most of it's like the same as what you're used to: love, joy, peace, patience. Beneficence is kindness, which isn't wrong. It's just wanted to kind of emphasize this like active nature of it. It's not just like being nice and polite. It's like actively seeking good for other people, doing kind things for people. So I gotta find another way to say that, because beneficence is just too obscure of a word. Beneficial living is usually goodness. I have seen at least one other translation, it might be NRSV or maybe the New Jerusalem Bible, they translate it as generosity.
Oh, that's nice.
Which is pretty good. This agathos, this word, wherever it comes up, it's not goodness as in like following the rules or being obedient or being compliant. It's goodness in the sense of benefiting the people around you,
like living harmoniously, actively.
Yeah, right. Kind of like the kindness, like I'm actively doing things that are beneficial for the people around me, that I'm giving gifts,
shalom,
I'm working for other people's well-being.
That's great.
It's more specific than, so the word good is like includes that. It's just so broad and vague, you can kind of make it mean whatever you want.
Yeah.
And it's not that broad. And faithfulness, I just wanted to point out that this is pistis, where we've been doing trust or faithfulness or commitment or allegiance. And this is just an example of where pretty much everybody translates it as faithfulness instead of faith or belief. I'm not making it up that's one way to translate this word.
Yeah.
So
great.
Yeah, I think we made it through our lists here.
Yeah, we did. Bam. And we've got one chapter left in Galatians. This is good. Well, hey everybody, thank you so much for joining us for this leg of the journey. The easiest way to support Found in Translation is to leave us a rating or a review in your podcast player of choice, or giving us a thumbs up on the video platform you're watching this on. That makes it easier for more people to find the show. Second best way to support the show is to become a sponsor for just $5 a month. When you do that, you get comment access on the Translations Google Doc and the satisfaction that you're supporting exceptionally nerdy independent media. You can find a link to join the community in the episode description. The music you're listening to is by Kevin MacLeod at Incompetech.com. Found in Translation was produced by Perry FM on unceded Chinook land. Goodbye, Brandon.
Bye, Brandon.
Bye, everybody. See you next week.